Okay, so this is the Torah portion, Balak. And Mia, you asked me some questions about Balaam. So I have found some readings of the 19th century. Louis Ginsberg undertook the task of arranging the Haggadah into chronological order. So this is part of those readings. Zen Garcia put it together into a collection of books called The Legends of the Jews, and this is in book number 3. It's quite lengthy, but it's really informative. So I thought I'd read it so that you can get that knowledge. So it's in chapter 5. The man whom the Moabites and Midianites believed to be Moses' peer was none other than Laban, Israel's arch enemy, who in olden days had wanted to root out entirely Jacob and all his family, and who had later on incited Pharaoh and Amalek against the people of Israel to bring about their destruction. Hence, too, the name Balaam, which means the devourer of nations, for he was determined to devour the nation of Israel. Just at this time, Balaam was at the zenith of his power, for his curse had brought upon the Moabites their defeat at the hands of Sihon, Sihon, and his prophecy that his compatriot Balak should wear the royal crown had just been fulfilled, so that all the kings sent ambassadors to seek advice from him. He had gradually developed from an interpreter of dreams to a sorcerer, and had not attained the still greater dignity of a prophet, thus even surpassing his father, who had indeed been prophet too, but not so notably as one. God would permit the heathens to have no ground for exculpation, for saying in the future world, "Thou hast kept us far from thee." To them, as well as to Israel, he gave kings, sages, and prophets. But whereas the former showed themselves worthy of their high trust, the latter proved themselves unworthy of it. Both Solomon and Nebuchadnezzar were rulers over all the world. The former built the temple and composed many hymns and prayers. The latter destroyed the temple and cursed and blasphemed the Lord, saying, "I will ascend up above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High." Both David and Haman received great treasures from Yahweh, but the former employed them to secure a site for God's sanctuary, whereas the latter, with his, tried to destroy the whole nation. Moses was Israel's prophet, and Balaam was prophet of the heathens. But how great a contrast between those two. Moses exhorted his people to keep from sin, whereas Balaam counseled the nations to give up their moral course of life and to become addicted to lewdness. Balaam was also different from the Israelite prophet in his cruelty. They had such piety for the nations that misfortune among the heathens caused them suffering and sorrow, whereas Balaam was so cruel that he wanted to destroy an entire nation without any cause. Balaam's course of life and his actions show convincingly why God withdrew from the heathen the gift of prophecy. For Balaam was the last of the heathen prophets. Shem had been the first whom God had commissioned to communicate his words to the heathens. This was after the flood, when God said to Shem, "Shem, had my Torah existed among the previous 10 generations, I suppose I should not have destroyed the world by the flood. Go now, announce to the nations of the earth my revelations. Ask them if they will not accept my Torah." Throughout 400 years did Shem go about as a prophet, but the nations of the earth did not heed. The prophets that labored after him among the heathen were Job and his 4 friends, Eliphaz, Zophar, Bildad, and Elihu, as well as Balaam, all of whom were descendants of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with his union with Milcah, in order that the heathens might not say, "Had we had a prophet like Moses, we should have received the Torah." God gave them Balaam as a prophet, who in no way was inferior to Moses, either in wisdom or the gift of prophecy. Moses was indeed the greatest prophet among the Israelites, but Balaam was his peer among the heathens. But although Moshe expelled the heathen prophet in that God called him without any previous preparation, whereas the other could obtain divine revelations only through sacrifices, still Balaam had one advantage over the Israelite prophet. Moses had to pray to God to show him his ways, whereas Balaam was the man who could declare of himself that he knew the knowledge of the Most High. But because, in spite of his high prophetic dignity, Balaam had never done anything good or kind, but through his evil tongue had almost destroyed all the world, God vowed a vow to his people that he would never exchange them for another people or nation, and that he would never permit them to dwell in any other land other than Palestine. So Balak now sent messages to Balaam with the following message: "Think not that I ask thy help against Israel exclusively in my own interests, and that thou canst expect from me alone honour and rewards for thy service. But rest assured that all nations will then honour thee, that Canaanites as well as Egyptians will cast themselves at thy feet when thou shalt have destroyed Israel. This people that have gone out of Egypt hath covered the earth, Sihon and Og," which were the giants, remember, "the eyes that guarded the whole land, and now they are about to destroy us as well. They are not indeed greater heroes than we, nor are their hosts more numerous than ours, but they conquer as soon as they open their lips in prayer, and that we cannot do. Try now to see if I may not gradually become their master, so that I may at least lead a certain percent of them to destruction, be it only a 24th part in them, or of them," which is interesting. So Balak himself was even a greater magician and soothsayer than Balaam, but he lacked the gift of properly grasping prophetic observations. He knew through his sorcery that he was to be the cause of the death of 24,000 Israelites, but he did not know in what way Israel was to suffer a great loss. Hence he requested Balaam to curse Israel, hoping by this curse to be able to restrain Israel from entering the Holy Land. Balak's message to Balaam consisted of the elders of Moab and Midian. The latter were themselves great magicians, and by their art established the truth that should Balaam obey Balak's summons, their mission against Israel would be successful. But should he hesitate, even for a moment, to follow them, nothing was to be expected from him. When they now reached Balaam, and he bade them to stay overnight to await his answer, the elders of Midian instantly returned, for they knew that they had now nothing to expect from him. And they said, "Is there such a father as hates his son? God is the father of Israel. He loves them. Shall he now, owing to a curse from Balaam, turn his love into hatred?" Indeed, had the matter depended on Balaam's wishes, he would doubtless instantly have acquiesced and followed Balak's summons. For he hated Israel more than Balak. So Balaam hated Israel more than Balak, and was much pleased with the commission of the Moabite king. The elders that Balak had sent had besides in their possession of all needful instruments of magic, so that Balaam might have no excuse for not instantly following them. But Balaam had, of course, to bid his time and first find out if God would permit him to go to Balak. Hence he bade the Moabite messengers stay overnight, because God never appears to the heathen prophets save at night. As Balaam expected, God appeared by night and asked Balaam, "Who are these people with thee?" And Balaam was one of the 3 men whom God put to the test, and who miserably failed to pass it. When God appeared to Cain and asked, "Where is Abel thy brother?" he tried to deceive God, and should have replied, "Lord of the world, what is hidden and what is open, both alike are known to thee. Why dost thou inquire after my brother?" But instead of this reply, he said, "I know not. Am I not my brother's keeper?" God therefore said to him, "Thou hast spoken thy own sentence. The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground, and now cursed art thou." Hezekiah acted like Cain when the messengers from the king of Babylon came to him, and Isaiah the prophet asked him, "What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee?" Hezekiah should have answered, "Art thou a prophet of God, and thou ask me?" But instead of giving this answer, he replied haughtily and boastfully, "They are come from a far country unto me, even from Babylon." On account of this haughty answer, Isaiah announced to the king his prophecy, "Behold, the days come, that all that is in thine house shall be carried to Babylon, and of thy sons that shall issue from thee, they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." The scoundrel Balaam too should have made saying to God's question, "What men are these with thee?" but saying, "Lord of the world, everything lies open before thee, and nothing is hidden from thee. Why do you ask me?" But he, on the other hand, made quite a different answer and started to boast, saying to God, "Although thou dost not distinguish me, and dost not spread my fame over the world, still the kings seek me. Balak, the king of Moab, has sent to ask me to curse Israel." Then God said, "Because thou speakest thus, thou shalt not curse the people." And added, "O thou wicked rascal, I said of Israel that he that touches them touches the apple of my eye, and yet thou wish to touch them and curse them. Therefore shall thy eye be blinded." Thus Balaam became blind of one eye, as he had already been lame of one foot. Balaam, now perceiving that God did not wish him to curse Israel, said, "Well, if it be so, then I shall bless them." God said, "They have no need of thy blessing, for they are blessed." God said to Balaam, "As one says to a bee, neither thy honey nor thy sting." On the following morning, Balaam gave the elders of Moab his answer, saying that he would not allow Balak's call, but not betraying to them the truth that God had forbidden him to curse Israel. He said instead, "God said to me, Go not with these men, for that would be beneath thy dignity, but await nobler ambassadors." Balaam's plan was to insult Balak, so that he should send no further messengers to him, and no one might discover that he could accomplish nothing beyond the word of God. His expectations, however, were disappointed. The ambassadors, in their turn, not quite painstaking in their representation of the truth, told their king that Balaam considered it beneath his dignity to appear in their escort, making no mention of God, but speaking as if the refusal came simply and exclusively from Balaam. Balak thereupon sent more honourable ambassadors to Balaam, until he was at last obligated to admit that he could undertake nothing against God's command. Even then, it is true, he did not admit that his acceptance or refusal of Balak's invitation depended entirely upon God, but declared that he could, if he wished, do as he chose, but did not choose to transgress God's prohibition. In his second embassy, Balak promised Balaam more for his service than he had offered him the first time. Balaam's answer was as follows: "If Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord my God." These words characterized the man who had three bad qualities: a jealous eye, a haughty spirit, and a greedy soul. His jealousy was the reason why he wanted to curse Israel, whom he envied for their good fortune. In his haughtiness, he told the first messengers that falsehood, that God would not let him go with them because it would be beneath his dignity. And his avarice was expressed in his answer to the second embassy, in which he did not only superstitiously mention Balak's silver and gold, but spoke his mind by explaining to them that their master could not adequately compensate him for his service, saying, if Balak were to hire hosts against Israel, his success would still be doubtful, whereas he should be certain of success if he hired me. And it goes on. He did not, however, give even the second embassy a divisive answer, but said to them also, I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more. Now therefore I pray you, tarry ye also here this night, that I may know what the Lord will speak unto me more. These words of his held unconscious prophecies, I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord, was as much as to say that he could not put the blessings of God to Israel to naught. Tarry ye also here tonight contained the prophecy that this second embassy would be as much disappointed as the first. And although Balaam accompanied the second messengers, still he had no power to curse Israel, but only to bless them. Finally, the words, what the Lord will speak unto me more, held a prediction that God would bestow even more benedictions upon Israelis through him. God permits man to go upon the way he chooses to go. When God appeared to Balaam the first time, he said to him, thou shalt not go with them. But when Balaam still did not relinquish his desire to go to Balak, God would not interfere. Hence, at his second appearance, God said to Balaam, if the men be come to call thee, rise up, go with them, but only the word which I speak unto thee shall you speak. Audacity prevails even before God. Balaam's steadfast insistence upon his wish wrestled from God his consent to Balaam's journey to Moab. He warned him of its consequences, saying to him, I take no pleasure in the destruction of sinners, but if thou art bound to go to thy destruction, do so. Whosoever leads righteous men astray upon an evil way will fall into the ditch of his own digging. Balaam was misled by God's behaviour toward him, and thus plunged into destruction. When God first appeared to him and asked him, what men are these with thee? This blasphemer thought, God knew them not. It seems clear that there are times when he is not aware of what goes on, and I shall now be able to do with his children as I wish. Balaam was misled by God because he had with his words seduced to unchastity people who had up to his time lived in purity. God's apparent change of decision that first prohibited him from going to Balak and then prohibited him to do so completely bewildered him, so that he thought, God at first said to me, go thou not with them. But then the second time he said, go with them. So too will he change his words, curse them not, into curse them. Just as Balaam was confused by God, so too were the magicians that Balak had sent to him. At the first visit, these had thought their magic law established that he would accept Balak's invitation, but God made him decline it. At the second time, on the other hand, they established that he would not accept the invitation, and God made him obey his summons.